It's 1998, and you're listening to the radio. Your favorite song comes on, and you really wish you could listen to it again later. Being a high school student with no money, you do what everyone else did at the time. You put a blank cassette tape into your stereo and wait for the radio station to play the song again so you can record it. Bootleg tapes have been around for years. Making mixtapes on your home stereo was a rite of passage, but there were issues with this method. The recording was dependent on the radio signal. The local station would start the song late and cut it off early. You would be recording the ending to Head Over Feet, only for the end of it to be interrupted by DJ Krusty. But in 1998, cassette tapes were nearly dead. CDs were the main way albums were sold in stores and had been for a few years. But something new was released at this time. Stereos that could copy CDs. When these came out, the news said that it would kill the music industry because, unlike cassettes, a burned CD was identical to the original copy. Unfortunately for the music industry, something way worse was coming. Welcome to Y2K FM. I'm Melinda Wires, and today's episode covers one of the biggest topics surrounding the early 2000s, stealing music on the internet. I'll cover the history of peer-to-peer file sharing, how various platforms worked, and the outcome of what was once the Wild West of the internet. In the summer of 1999, a program called Napster arrived. A friend of ours came to school with the CD and claimed that it had over 50 songs on it. Someone else said they had a buddy who downloaded over 1,000 songs onto his computer. They had gone to the Napster website and downloaded a program that let them search for songs and download them for free. Now, most of us didn't have the best computers at the time. If you listened to my episode on when the internet was slow, you'll remember that our house didn't even have a 56K connection yet, much less a CD drive that could burn MP3s to disk. For the rest of us, it was still cheaper to buy a handful of CDs a year than buy a brand new computer. The following spring, Napster would be all over the news after being sued by various record companies. They discovered that their music was being shared through Napster's service, and the lawsuits began flooding in.
Metallica, a definitive heavy metal band of the 80s and still rocking, is challenging the counterculture of the new century, the internet. The group that recorded And Justice for All is seeking justice for fellow artists. It sued Napster, what some people consider the Robin Hood of the internet. The website allows users to locate and copy music from each other. Critics say much of that music is pirated. Last month, Metallica found 6 versions of its new song on Napster.
Napster is going to be a very simple story on the legal level, namely that the owners of intellectual property will win against organizations like Napster that create a technology for the illegal sharing of intellectual property. But on the enforcement level, there is no answer. There is very little way that it can use legal remedies against a diffuse community of online users where generally there is no large corporate defendant at the center of the process.
As for Metallica, Napster says it will comply with the group's demand by blocking users found to be pirating the band's music from its site.
1 year later, it would be shut down, only for several other sites to pop up and take its place. Napster was using a protocol known as peer-to-peer file sharing. While they didn't host the music files themselves, Napster did host an index database of shared file locations. Users would search for the music they wanted in the client, select the song file, and hit download. Now, this wasn't instant. Remember that most computers were connected to the internet with dial-up. Downloading one song could take over an hour. This was dependent on both your download speed and the computer sharing the file's upload speed. And remember how finicky dial-up was. Someone would call and knock you offline, pausing your download. Once you got back on, the other computer sharing that file might have gone offline, and your download would have to wait until someone else with it got back on. After a download was finished, it was considered a courtesy to leave your file in the download folder to seed. Seeding allowed other people to use your file location as their download source. People who didn't seed their downloads were known as leeches. Many people thought they would get in more trouble if they were caught seeding than downloading the files themselves. In October of 2001, Apple introduced the iPod. There had been a handful of MP3 players before it, but the iPod was the big one. It had something else going for it as well: iTunes. iTunes was a program that allowed you to rip and catalog your music from your CD collection to your computer. It also let you put that ripped music onto your iPod. You can now listen to your music all day without burning any CDs. MP3 players everywhere were about to fill up very quickly. As soon as Napster shut down, more peer-to-peer networks started popping up, and with better technology. Kazaa and Morpheus were semi-decentralized. Unlike Napster with its central database, Kazaa used something known as supernodes. These supernodes were users with the fastest internet connections and largest amounts of shared files. Kazaa indexed the supernodes, using them as starting points, which made searches more efficient. If one supernode didn't have something, Kazaa had a list of others that probably did. LimeWire was another client, and probably the most widely used one. It used the first fully decentralized peer-to-peer network protocol known as the Gnutella network. Yes, it sounds like the chocolate hazelnut spread, just add a G at the beginning of it, like the GNU operating system. When a user searched for a file, the request was sent out through the entire network, and the first node to have it would respond. LimeWire had its own version of supernodes called ultrapeers. Instead of being indexed by LimeWire itself, they were just more likely to have the file being requested. These file-sharing clients allowed users to search, download, and share music files with ease. If a song you liked was playing on the radio, you could just now search for it on Kazaa, download it, and burn it to CD. Soon the music industry started to notice album sales begin to drop. Why would anyone go out and spend $25 on a new CD when they could just download the one single they wanted off of it for free? Now that music was widely available and easier to listen to than ever, there was no reason to go to a record store. People were spending their money on MP3 players, bigger hard drives to their computers, faster CD drives, and CD players in their cars with aux input. But the music industry didn't die out. Bands still released albums and went on tours. They had MySpace pages and sold out concerts. Newfound access to music outside of what was being played on the radio arguably made smaller artists more accessible. A few years later, the Recording Industry Association of America, or the RIAA, went on the offensive. Instead of just going after the file-sharing programs, they started to go after the users. People downloading music to their computers start getting notices in the mail, phone calls, and court dates. In 2003, Sony's record division sued a 20-year-old college student for downloading 30 songs on LimeWire. At one point in the trial, his fines had ballooned to $675,000. A woman in Minnesota was sued over 24 songs for over $200,000. And in 2004, a 12-year-old girl was fined $2 per song she had downloaded. These were just major cases I could find. The RIAA went after several people during this time, and there was just too many to cover. So how did the recording companies know that someone had downloaded their stuff? The easiest answer is your IP address. The more difficult answer is how they got those IP addresses. Your ISP can monitor downloads and hand over your information if asked. Rumors began to spread that groups were being hired by the record companies to fill file-sharing sites with junk files, malware, and hosting their own honeypot websites. A song file would be labeled something like onemoretime_daftpunk_257.mp3, but after you downloaded and played it, you would get garbled static every 10 seconds throughout the song, or it was a very low-quality version that had been compressed to make it easier to share and download. Sometimes it wasn't even the right song. The title would be correct, but the band name would be wrong. You would go years thinking Veruca Salt sang Cannonball. Using a peer-to-peer network came with bigger risks than a lawsuit from the record companies. People weren't just using the clients to download music anymore. With faster internet speeds, you could share much larger files, like software and video. The larger file size made it easier to hide the malware and viruses in the files. A standard MP3 file was about 2 megabytes, but threat actors could create a larger executable file and name it after a top downloaded song, hoping someone would download it. That Green Day song isn't supposed to be 15 megabytes, but when you're on cable internet and letting a long list of files download at various speeds, you might not notice until it's too late. Sometimes the peer-to-peer client you're using wasn't secure. You have to remember that you're basically allowing strangers on the internet to download songs from your actual computer. The client knows to look for the files and folders you made shareable. Some hackers are able to bypass this and step back out of that shared folder and into the rest of your hard drive, stealing valuable personal data. People soon lost trust with these large peer-to-peer clients. Kazaa and LimeWire became bloated with adware and spyware. The risk of downloading viruses grew exponentially. You had the latest Black Eyed Peas album, but now your computer randomly rebooted itself, and strange things started to appear in the task manager.
Question for you guys. How many files do you think are being shared on Kazaa right now?
8.
8?
3 terabytes. I have no idea.
3 terabytes? How about 900 million files are currently being shared on Kazaa?
That's a lot of files.
That's a lot of files, which is cool because it gives us a lot of, we can download all kinds of things, MP3s, movies, you name it, but there's one problem.
What's that?
And that's Kazaa is filled with spyware and adware. Check this out. Take a look at the screen. This is what happened when I left Kazaa for about 5 minutes. Nothing but pop-ups. Close these out, and we finally get to the application. Now, once you even get to Kazaa, you see there's still ads in here and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's not a good application if you want to keep your system nice and clean.
In 2003, the Pirate Bay was opened by a Swedish anti-copyright group. Unlike Kazaa and LimeWire, the Pirate Bay did not have a physical client to download. They simply listed the links to the torrent files on their website. Users would use an open-source client, typically BitTorrent, to download the files to their computer. BitTorrent worked a little differently than other peer-to-peer systems. With Kazaa and LimeWire, you downloaded and shared an entire file through the network. With BitTorrent, you downloaded pieces of a file distributed across multiple seeds. When your download is finished, your computer would then seed just a piece of the file. The pieces are downloaded out of order and reassembled by the BitTorrent client once complete. Cutting up the files like this made it easier to distribute and faster to share because users weren't relying on one person to have a 2 megabyte song, they were relying on 25 people to have 80 kilobytes of a song.
The entertainment industry hasn't been able to get a guilty verdict against sites like Pirate Bay in the United States because they aren't the ones who actually have the unauthorized material. But industry lawyers say this case sets an important precedent. Joe Oliver is an attorney with the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry.
Because the Pirate Bay was such a well-known site, the courts, the convictions and also the sentence serve as a deterrent to others who would engage in this sort of activity.
However, the defendants didn't seem to be deterred. Even after the verdict came down, the Pirate Bay was up and running using servers set up somewhere outside of Sweden. In an internet video, Pirate Bay's Sunda mocked the verdict. He held up a handwritten IOU.
I think that's as close as they're going to get to any money from us.
Indeed, the entertainment industry may feel vindicated by the Swedish court's verdict, but the truth is that a decade of legal efforts to combat online piracy has done little to stop it. In fact, by most estimates, it continues to grow. Laura Seidel, NPR News.
Remember how I said earlier that iTunes came out in 2001? In 2003, they released the iTunes Store. Suddenly you had a safe outlet to legally buy songs. They were typically 99 cents per song or $9.99 per album. Sometimes the singles would be grayed out, only available if you bought the whole album, but that was a major step in the future of digital media. Soon, several other online retailers began to offer legal MP3 purchases, which could be downloaded and put on whatever device you had. ISPs were now the major hurdle in downloading music. They still worked with the music and movie industries to point out power users, but if they noticed too much traffic on your connection, they would call you with a warning. Hey, stop downloading episodes of True Blood or we'll shut off your account.
This is Day to Day from NPR News. I'm Alex Chapman.
And I'm Madeline Brand. Alex, you know that iPod ad with the black silhouette that's bopping to some music on his or her iPod?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think that person's listening to?
Not Perry Como. Beyonce?
Well, you never know. Maybe so. But whatever that person's bopping to, the song probably wasn't bought on iTunes. It turns out that the average iPod user isn't downloading much music from iTunes. That's also owned by Apple Computer. Forrester Research, a tech consulting company, says the typical iPod contains only about 20 songs purchased from iTunes. Ooh. Yeah. Josh Bernoff did the research for Forrester.
I and all the other people who were predicting the online music market back 5 years ago assumed that every single user of MP3 player would be generating music sales through stores like iTunes. And while there do appear to be sales, and there are quite a few, they've sold more than 1 billion tracks over at Apple, 20 songs per person was certainly not the expectation of the industry, and it's not enough to nearly make up for the decrease in CD sales that has happened in the last 5 years.
Then in 2007, Netflix, the company that lets you rent DVDs in the mail, launched their video streaming service. A year later, Spotify appeared. YouTube was gaining traction as a source of entertainment, and people were no longer required to download a file to consume media. The golden age of digital piracy was over. Kazaa shut down in 2006 and LimeWire in 2010. The Pirate Bay and other torrent sites remained active, but not so much for music. Peer-to-peer file sharing itself isn't illegal. Blizzard used it to distribute patches for World of Warcraft. South by Southwest used to release a torrent that included a collection of music from bands that were attending the festival. Today you can use it to download large files like Linux ISOs that would otherwise be easily corrupted or time out before the download finished. Nowadays we have cloud storage for sending large files to coworkers and friends. We have internet and cellular data speeds that are so fast that we don't have to worry about physically storing the music and videos on our devices. You search for it, hit play, and it just starts. After refurbishing my old iPod, I actually had trouble finding a place to download MP3s to even put on it. Amazon Music is now mostly streaming, and so are the songs on Google Play Store. Bandcamp is one of the only places left to offer high-fidelity music files, but major label musicians don't really use it. For that, you'll have to go back to iTunes. Apple Music. If you like this episode, feel free to subscribe. You can listen to more episodes on the website, Y2KFM, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
What is that sound? Is that coming from your laptop? It's not supposed to sound... What the... What's all that crap? How long has that been? I haven't seen that one since the 90s.